there was this clip that went viral with the interview on CBS News with the author Ta-Nehisi Coates. Now, Ta-Nehisi Coates is an author who, whatever book award he's won it, right? And he's had best-selling books, and I mean, really lauded as like one of the great authors, particularly, and I wouldn't even just qualify it as black, but one of the great authors in the past generation. But Ta-Nehisi Coates decided to do a book, and in that book, he also decided to take on. He talked about Senegal. He talked about I forget the other place that he mentioned in the book, but he also decided to take on the conversation around Israel and Palestine. And it was interesting when he went to do this conversation about his book on CBS News. What seemed to be like just kind of a puff little interview kind of turned a little bit.
What is it that so particularly offends you about the existence of a Jewish state that is a Jewish safe place and not any of the other states out there?
There's nothing that offends me about a Jewish state. I am offended by the idea of states built on ethnocracy, no matter where they are.
Muslim included.
I would not want a state where any group of people lay down their citizenship rights based on ethnicity. The country of Israel is a state in which half the population exists on one tier of citizenship, and everybody else that's ruled by Israelis exists on another tier, including Palestinian Israeli citizens. The only people that exist on that first tier are Israeli Jews. Why do we support that? Why is that okay? I'm the child of Jim Crow. I'm the child of people that were born into a country where that was exactly the case of American apartheid. I walk over there and I walk through the occupied territories and I walk down the street in Hebron. And a guy says to me, I can't walk down the street unless I profess my religion. I'm with another pastor. No. I want to, this is very, very important. It's extremely important.
Let me lay it down.
I'm working with the person that is guiding me is a Palestinian whose father, whose grandfather and grandmother was born in this town. And I have more freedom to walk than he does. He can't ride on certain roads. He can't get water in the same way that Israeli citizens who live less than a mile away from him can.
And why
is that okay?
Why is that? Why is there no agency in this book for the Palestinians? They exist in your narrative merely as victims of the Israelis, as though they were not offered peace at any juncture, as though they don't have a stake in this as well. What is their role in the lack of a Palestinian?
I have a very, 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 very moral compass about this. And again, perhaps it's because of my ancestry. Either apartheid is right or it's wrong. It's really, really simple. Either what I saw was right or it's wrong. I am, for instance, against the death penalty. What the person did to get the death penalty, it really doesn't matter to me. I don't care if they were selling a nickel bag of marijuana or if they were a serial killer. I am against the death penalty. I am against a state that discriminates against people on the basis of ethnicity. I'm against that. There is nothing the Palestinians could do that would make that okay for me. My book is not based on the hyper-morality of the Palestinian people.
You can cut that. You can cut that. Yeah. She was like, yo.
This is not what we discussed.
Yeah, but again, I think it is fascinating, right? And I think and obviously Miracle is ready. But we've had this conversation on this show, right? And we've had this conversation.
I mean, you went there and experienced exactly what Ta-Nehisi Coates was talking about.
I went there. I was in Hebron. I experienced that, and it was. It takes your breath away. I was taken aback. When we left Hebron, I wanted to go home. I was like, all right, I've seen enough. Because it was such an intensity. And it was really like being like a police state ×5, right? And I also witnessed that discrimination, right? Me as an American was allowed to go through a checkpoint, but our Palestinian guide who lives there, right, could not drive through a checkpoint, had to get out and walk through a checkpoint. So I did experience this and talked about it and wrote about it afterwards. And again, I do think that it was interesting that we didn't even get to any of the other parts of the book, that whenever you enter into the chat and it is about Israel and Palestine, it's like it's elevated to a certain level. And it's like he got so much pushback on it, but you don't get pushback when you talk about these other things, right? There's no pushback if you say like, hey, Russia shouldn't be invading Ukraine. You don't get any pushback from that. But when we're seeing this hyper militaristic attack from, and the Israeli government under Benjamin Netanyahu right now, where now Lebanon's being attacked right now. I mean, just it's almost like Netanyahu's like, I'm just going to continue to make war on anybody until, you know, it's his time to go. And we kind of talked about this October surprise. It's like, why aren't we able to say or critique it?
Coates was very clear that this book was to writers. These are for people. Coates was very clear that this book that he wrote is for writers, to call to them to take action, because we have been missing a lot of narratives and stories and perspectives. When he said that most of these newsrooms do not have a Palestinian anchor, most of these people don't even have Palestinian guests on the shows and on the programs. And I think that when people are under attack, sometimes they don't have the ability to sit there and say, other people are under attack. I'm not the only person going through this. And we have people making decisions on who lives or dies because they don't see other people as humans or value. They just see people as collateral damage because they haven't been exposed to those stories. The first thing. The second thing is Coates was talking about the power of writing because people were trying to shelve his book. He was talking about like pain and anger and trauma, and what does that mean? Because all of us have some type of trauma that we are working through, and when we take unresolved trauma and you connect that to state violence, somebody's going to get hurt. But what I found very interesting is a lot of times when you speak about what's going on, the first thing people ask you is have you been there, right? Have you been there? Do you know what you're talking about? He's someone who's been there, who knows what he's talking about, and still he's now being told he doesn't have freedom to talk about what he actually saw, which I thought was like very funny. And then when he's talking about this moral line, this through line that no one has to die, people cannot wrap their minds around the fact that like you as a state can exist without force and violence. And one of the things, he was having a conversation on Jon Stewart, and Jon Stewart asked, how do we progress as a society without exploitation? Is exploitation required for any society, any state to exist? And I think that is the question we have to wrestle with, because we have
That's your bag, right?
Right.
Yeah. Miracle wants no states, for those that don't know.
No, it's not even that about no states. It's that we don't even allow ourselves the ability to think about a state that does not require violence. Because I was talking to someone who considers themselves to be avid Zionist, and I was like, if God gave you the land, did he not also give you a duty and a responsibility to the people who are on that land as well? Why is it that we have this idea that whether it's America, whether it's Israel, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Russia, that we have to own the land by killing people who are there to say that we own it? Why can't we say we own the land and therefore we're going to take care of everyone who's right here and we're going to invest in everyone who is right here? Why do we have to pick and choose, as like Coates was saying, who gets rights and who doesn't? And that becomes the issue when your rights are dependent on a border. People are always going to be fighting over that border because they want those rights. But if we all have those inalienable rights, if we know we have clean air, clean water, the housing, the ability to live, the ability to dream and have an actual opportunity economy, I don't think then we have a whole infrastructure that is invested in surveillance, that's invested in militarism, that's invested in death. I was having a conversation with someone yesterday and they were like, if cancer gets solved tomorrow, how many people do you think are going to be poor? Because their whole entire economy is based on people dying of cancer. And when we think about stuff like that, I think it is very imperative when we have people like Coates really showing a light of what our world could be, that we sit there and think about not only of how much we have invested into death and destruction, but like what could be our other alternatives for our supports, for our economies, where are the other ways that we could be making money, and try to uplift that. So that's why I think it's very and powerful that he was talking about this book is for the writers and this is what writers can be doing to save the world.
A couple of interesting points that I saw, like I think the reporter's questions to Ta-Nehisi Coates had a lot of white supremacy rhetoric riddled within it. And,
absolutely.
One of those things was like this right to comfort, right? So here he is saying, I read your book and I read the part about your trip to Palestine and Israel, and it made me think after reading it, wow, why would a place like Israel even exist after such atrocities? But he, instead of framing it like, after reading this, now I'm feeling guilty for my support of Israel, he's blaming Ta-Nehisi Coates like,
why'd you write this truth?
Yeah.
How dare you?
Yeah. Why did you present me with these facts that make me question my stance on things rather than grappling with his own stance and being like, you know what? Maybe there are some thought processes that need to change here, right? And I think this is what happens a lot with art, where like a lot of white folks are presented with the truth in art, and instead of being like, okay, I need to grapple with this truth and I need to utilize this truth to kind of question some of the stances that I take on, I'm going to blame the artist for even mentioning this in the first place and say that this artist is trying to be divisive, when really what I'm responding to is how this artist impacted my views of what I stand on.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I mean, that's very, it's funny. You're like kind of like the Tim Walsh of the show. I mean, it's very teacher, coach. You know, you broke it down from a teacher's perspective, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, really, he could have done that. But again, like, he's like, no, I'm not going to grapple with this. I'm going to blame you.
Yes.
Like, how dare you take this stance or have this idea? And that's what we do. And then not only do we attack those voices, right? Like Ta-Nehisi Coates mentioned, then we silence them.
Yes.
Then it's like, oh, you're speaking out and you're saying something that we don't agree with, therefore we'll deplatform you, right? We'll take you off of the mainstream and we'll relegate you to this small place over here so we don't have to hear you. And it's about like, because the truth that you're speaking to me makes me uncomfortable. So instead of dealing with like a better world that Miracle talks about on every show, nobody wants to listen to her.
I'm like, shut up.
Every show. It's like, we don't want to hear that. Yeah. We'd rather live in this, crazy reality that we created.